global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald. Good evening, everybody. 41 people so far we know of are injured near Junction 3 of the M25. We have a reporter on the way there. Reports on that story soon. Huge traffic jams on the M25. Sorry if you're involved in those. And do you remember this? Do you remember that whole phenomenon that took place at Glastonbury? Jeremy Corbyn. A friend of mine owns a nightclub in Kent. Said he'd never ever seen people on a Saturday night on the dance floor calling out a political leader's name. It was, I can't do it very well, Jeremy Corbyn or something like that. He was this remarkable cult hero, the sort of kindly old uncle approaching 70 who appeared to be unthreatening, who was really, really nice and wanted people to have lots of money and for the world to be perfect and gorgeous and beautiful. Because the trouble was that 33 years before that, he had been, for that entirety of the period, a backbench MP, allied to all sorts of really very, very unpleasant people. I personally think that Martin McGuinness and Jerry Adams are very unpleasant people. Some of you may disagree with that. But clearly, his decision to back the Palestinian cause over the Jewish-Israeli cause is something that has been there throughout his whole political career. I predicted at last year's general election that his past would catch up with him. I was wrong. It's taken another year. I get that it's the Daily Mail. I know they hate Jeremy Corbyn, but the photographs of him attending the Palestinian Martyrs Cemetery, where a wreath was laid. Now, whether he was involved directly in it or not is open to some confusion, but amongst the graves there are the people who committed the abomination at the Munich Olympics back in 1972. And this, of course, from a leader who, apart from the IRA, regards Hamas as, and I quote, friends. Is Jeremy Corbyn's past beginning to catch up with him? Now, in response to the Mail publishing these pictures, nearly all of the mainstream newspapers are running this story. Here was Jeremy Corbyn on Sky News responding to it earlier today.
A wreath was indeed laid by some of those who attended the conference of those that were killed in Paris in 1992.
Were you involved in that wreath laying?
I was present when it was laid. I don't think I was actually involved in it. I was there because I wanted to see a fitting memorial to everyone who's died in every terrorist incident everywhere, because we have to end it. You cannot pursue peace by a cycle of violence. The only way you pursue peace is a cycle of dialogue.
So the story is all over the shop. On the one hand, Corbyn said he was there to commemorate those who'd been killed in a terror attack in 1985. Then we heard it was a terror attack in 1992. Another account said 1991. You heard those words. He was struggling, in my opinion, to give an answer. And if you see the footage, his eyes were wandering all over the place, which is generally the sign of somebody who is not confident about what they are saying. And folks, it keeps happening again and again. Jeremy Corbyn's very unsavoury associations in the past. And by the way, this happened in 2014 when he was still a backbencher. He'd been there since 1983. His prospects of getting anywhere in politics were just about zip. And then this remarkable thing happened that he became leader of the Labour Party. And I want to ask you, I really do, does Jeremy Corbyn still have your trust as Labour leader and potential future Prime Minister? And if you think, yep, he's fine, I buy the explanation, I quite understand why he's looking all over the room, actually, the Palestinian cause deserves every support, call me on 0345 6060 973. And by the way, if you are a Corbynista, call that number, because the press, with the exception, of course, of the BBC, who I'll come to in a moment, but the rest of the press are giving him a very, very hard time. And if you think, do you know what, I really tried, I wanted to believe in this man, but he's now used up all his chances. Text to 84850. And maybe you think, actually, he's a bit of a disgrace. And it's about time the Labour Party simply got shot of him knowing, of course, that they can't, given their membership. But if that's how you feel, please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And, of course, watch us on Facebook and comment there too. I genuinely think that you do need to trust people by the friends they keep. I've been criticised by the friends I keep, but I've never mixed with people known to be terrorists. I've never mixed with people who supported a whole range of atrocities in the name of their cause. Jeremy Corbyn consistently for 35 years has done so. My view, folks, is that the past has finally caught up with him, and I think this is going to do Labour in the country irreparable damage. But I genuinely, sincerely want you to come on. You can agree with me, but please, if I've got this wrong, if you think the Daily Mail are prejudiced, if you think the whole story is wrong, come on, 0345 6060 973. Tell me I'm wrong. Now, I'm going to go to Castle Carey, a very, very beautiful part of the West Country, and speak to Clodagh. Good evening.
Hi. I'm not a Corbynista and I'm not a Labour Party member.
Right.
But I do think that Jeremy Corbyn is a person of integrity. And I do think, before the election, they were drawing attention to the fact that he met with Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness. Now, I'm sure they're highly unpleasant people. I don't justify the violence in Ireland at all, though it happened on both sides and everything. But so were the government meeting with them, but secretly. And they, unless they and the communities they represented had been brought in, there would be no peace process.
Well, Clodagh, I get that. Clodagh, I understand that. I understand that. And you're quite right that John Major was meeting the IRA, without telling the world that he was. And some would argue, Clodagh, that he laid the way for Blair to do the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. The difference here, I would suggest to you, is that Jeremy Corbyn invited into a House of Commons committee room Martin McGuinness and Gerry Adams within months of the attempt to kill the entire British cabinet in Brighton. So timing, Clodagh, I would suggest, does actually matter.
It does, but I'm just saying in retrospect you can see that he was ahead of the game, if anything. It's like if you don't bring all the, even the UVF, all these people, the communities they represent into it, you're not going to get to the table. And the thing with what's going on just now, I seriously believe there is a campaign, and the fact that the Israeli Prime Minister has got involved now, I do seriously think there's a campaign. A lot of the people have said they wouldn't even accept an apology from him, that they want him to resign. So I think there's a relentless...
Well, you've made mention, Clodagh. You've made mention of the Israeli Prime Minister, and you're absolutely right. And he has put out on social media tonight the laying of a wreath by Jeremy Corbyn on the graves of the terrorists who perpetrated the Munich massacre, and his comparison of Israel to the Nazis deserves unequivocal condemnation from everyone, left, right, and everything in between. And that, as you quite rightly pointed out, comes from Benjamin Netanyahu. But let me just ask you, Clodagh, and you're clearly a very fair-minded person. I mean, how does this sound to you? Here is an event, going back a couple of years, I agree, but here is an event where Jeremy Corbyn is speaking, and he talks about the Palestinians living in the West Bank, and he says they are under occupation, the very sort that will be recognised by many people in Europe who suffered occupation during the Second World War. Isn't that, Clodagh, just a little bit sick?
Actually, I think it's very important to, like, the scale of what happened. But when the people take a community within their own land and mistreat them and treat them as less than human sometimes, I think you have to draw attention to the principle. And I know that Gerald Kaufman stood up in Westminster in the House of Commons when he was alive, and he made comparisons. Now, he's Jewish himself, obviously. There isn't a comparison in the sense of the scale and the horror of what happened. But if you can depersonalize a people and treat them like animals, then you are, in a sense... Now, this is the thing about the English language. When you say like, doesn't always mean the same as. It can mean similar in the sense...
Oh, no, I get that. No. I understand that. But Clodagh, have a look at this. He befriends Adams and McGuinness, invites them to the House of Commons, barely weeks after some of the cabinet had been killed in an attempt to bring down the British government. He consistently befriends Hamas and a whole range of Palestinian killers. He's photographed with a wreath, though he can't quite remember whether he was involved in laying the wreath on the graves of people who committed not just murder at the Olympics in 1972, but torture as well. And yet when I sit one row behind him, Clodagh, in 2015, in St Paul's Cathedral, at a ceremony to commemorate the 75th anniversary of Battle of Britain Day, he won't sing the national anthem. Do you, Clodagh, understand why a lot of people are not happy with this man?
Yeah, I do, but as far as I know, within the national anthem, there's some pretty derogatory stuff about the Scots, about crushing the Scots.
Clodagh, but
I absolutely don't believe.
I'm just giving you a big picture here that says the guy won't sing the national anthem, but he's happy to have Jerry Adams and Hamas with him as friends. It doesn't look great, does it?
Trying to get at a world where we're getting on. He's trying to get at a world where there is peace. I don't believe for a moment that he actually wants to honour assassins of, people at the Olympics. I know it can be...
Well, he's given a very good impression, if you believe the Daily Mail, Clodagh.
Well, I don't believe the Daily Mail.
I know you don't. I know you don't. But a lot of people do, and a lot of other media organisations have. Clodagh, you have given a very, very robust defence of Jeremy Corbyn as a peacemaker. I am not convinced by it, but I think you've done it very, very well, and I thank you very much for your call. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC. It is now 7:15. As you heard at the top of the hour, there's been a collision on the M25 near Junction 3. We know so far 41 people have been injured. We're going to go to our LBC reporter, Nick Codling, who is there on the scene. Nick, good evening.
Good evening to you, Nigel. Yes, so as you heard, a major incident on the M25 earlier this afternoon. As you said, 41 people are being treated by the ambulance service after a coach overturned at around Junction 3 at around 4 p.m. this afternoon. Now, that includes 31 adults and 7 children with minor injuries. 3 others have been taken to hospital with more serious injuries. 3 fire engines, along with the ambulance service, attended the scene at Swanley. Earlier, firefighters were working to free 2 people who were trapped inside the coach. Now, the Junction 3 slip road on the anti-clockwise carriageway and lanes 1 and 2, they're still currently closed, but traffic is moving slowly in lane 3. Princess Royal University Hospital have said they're on a major incident alert at the moment, and the latest info from Highways England is that there's delays of around 50 minutes, and commuters are of course being advised to avoid the area.
I mean, given, Nick, relatively good weather, maybe the odd rain shower, but no great gusts or gales of wind, is there any causation that we understand as to why this coach turned over?
It's very unclear at the moment. We haven't had any information from police or anyone else as to what has actually happened. But with significant amount of people who have been affected by this, it's difficult to quite understand what's actually happened. But we're hoping to hear a bit later on this evening and find out a bit more. OK, when you do, let LBC know. Thank you. That was Nick Codling there at Junction 3 of the M25. And our thoughts are with all of those on that coach that are injured, and with the tens of thousands of people, some of whom will be listening to LBC right now, who have been inconvenienced, to say the very least. Now, I don't know how you feel sitting in those cars, whether Jeremy Corbyn raises your blood pressure or not, but I suspect that many, many people will have been absolutely furious. You see, again and again and again, Corbyn and his acolytes deny links to extremism, but those photographs that the Daily Mail found of him at the Palestinian martyrs ceremony, there next to a wreath, and he can't remember, you see. He can't remember whether he in fact himself was involved in laying the wreath or not. When he was interviewed today, he looked more shifty, I think, than I've ever seen him. Because during the general election, what counted for Corbyn is he appeared to be absolutely genuine and sincere. He wasn't, folks, looking like that today. It's becoming a really, really big story. The Mail have led with it. Many other media organisations are. Apart, of course, from the BBC. Oh, yes, absolutely. As revealed by the website Guido Fawkes, always sharp about this, and they put out this afternoon 6 anti-Boris stories on the BBC Politics homepage this afternoon. Not one mention
of the Corbyn Munich massacre row, despite it leading on other broadcasters, featuring in every newspaper, and Corbyn recording a piece to camera today. The BBC website, according to them, I couldn't possibly say this obviously, isn't even pretending to be impartial now. So it's not a big story to the BBC, but I would suggest that it is a big story out there in the country. Has Jeremy Corbyn now completely and utterly run out of chances? Are his links to extremist groups just, as they come out one after one, just too much to bear? And how, given all of this, can he have your trust? Not just as Labour leader, because we know that the Labour membership now is very, very Corbynista indeed. Well done, Ed Miliband. Genius. £3 a time, you can sign up, be a Labour member. Well, that's what's led to Corbyn. But what about, does he have your trust as a potential future Prime Minister of this country? John is a brand new caller to this show. He lives in Wanstead in East London. Good evening, John.
Hi, Nigel. I think Corbyn ran out of chances 3 years ago. I was a Labour member for 30 years.
Yeah.
Until he came in, I knew exactly what was going to happen. A lot of these things about Munich and denying Holocaust and all sorts of things, one knew about. I really don't know why it's taken so long to get to this stage.
Do you know what, John? I genuinely thought, and I said, this would all come out in the general election last year. I was wrong, it didn't, but it's out there now. So, John, so the Labour Party has been a very big part of your life.
That's correct. I'm a Jewish member. I have family killed in the Holocaust, murdered, grandparents. But the Labour Party was a good place for Jewish people. But now, absolute insult. But
traditionally, John, the Labour Party was very strong on its anti-racist, anti-Semitic credentials. How on earth did Corbyn, given that's how you feel about him, how the hell did he slip through the net?
I've no idea. As I say, I resigned 3 years ago when he came in. I knew exactly what was going to happen. I even asked for all my money back for the whole year. They gave it to me. I find it absolutely appalling. You got articles about the widows from the people who were killed in Munich, saying how disgraced they are for him going to the murderers.
Yes. Well, we've got Benjamin Netanyahu. We've got
it's an international incident already.
Yeah.
He's not even anywhere near being Prime Minister. It is caused an international incident. He's even denied Israel's right to exist, which is anti-Semitic. Even in the in the police guidelines, that is anti-Semitism. Just following up,
John, on what you've said, the widows of Israeli athletes murdered by terrorists have said they were extremely disturbed by reports that Corbyn had taken part in a wreath-laying ceremony near the graves of some of those responsible. Anki Spitzer and Ilana Romano, whose husbands, Andrei and Joseph, were among the 11 athletes taken hostage and killed at the 1972 Munich Olympics, warned that the Labour leader would be judged by the company that he keeps. Now, John, was the Corbynista type strain a very small part of a Labour Party during your 30 years?
No, I mean, never like this. It just followed Corbyn in for some reason, and these people in complete denial of anything that he's done. I mean, they say, oh, he's involved in the peace process. He meets strange people. But he was never involved in any peace process for Northern Ireland or the Middle East. He's
John, he was nobody. He was a backbench. He was a backbench MP who'd gone against his own party 500 times. He was a nobody, wasn't he? John, is there anything that would make you go back to the Labour Party?
Only if he resigns or goes, he'll be pushed out. He must be pushed out for anti-Semitism himself or racism. It's absolutely appalling.
John, it's a very, very strong phone call, and thank you very much indeed for calling me up today. I get on Twitter. Yes, he has my trust. No matter what you do to smear him, he is the most reliable leader the Labour Party has ever had. Sam, I think you're right. He's very reliable indeed. You know exactly what he'll do. He'll pick the side of the bad guys every single time. That's my view anyway. Please ring up, tell me I'm wrong. Nigel, I trust Jeremy 100%. My trust in you is as far as I can throw you, says Arnie. All right, Arnie, I'm not asking you, Arnie, to trust me. I'm just here as an invigilator, albeit one with a bit of an opinion. Corbyn is a disgrace as leader. He should be made to step down. I don't know how he has held on to this leadership for so long, says Kathy. Because, Kathy, hundreds of thousands of people have joined the Labour Party at Ed Miliband's £3 a pop. Well done, Ed, you're a genius. And he's now got a complete grip on the Labour Party. And people like John, you know, the Jewish man that phoned up from Wanstead, who'd been in the Labour Party for 30 years, have left, they've gone, they're appalled. And I thought that was a very important phone call, actually, in many, many ways. Let's ask Sajjad from Bradford what he makes of it all. Sajjad, good evening.
Hi, good evening, Nigel. Hope you're well.
I'm very well. I sort of can't quite believe that the leader of any other political party in my lifetime could have turned up at a wreath laying on the graves of people who committed a terrorist atrocity and still be in place.
Nigel, nothing surprises me these days. With friends like yours, Donald Trump and people like that who have done the most absurd things, this is a pale in comparison. Now,
sorry, Sajjad. When has Donald Trump... No, hang on. When has Donald Trump ever supported a terrorist or honoured their grave?
Okay, could I just speak for a minute?
Of course you can.
Okay, thank you very much.
But you started off slagging me, so I've got to have a go back, you know.
Let me just say one thing, Nigel. If somebody was to accuse you of being racist or an Islamophobe or a fascist, I would like to think that you'd step away from these accusations. But it wasn't long ago that you yourself was associated with far-right Swedish and French MEPs. Now, just the fact that you were associated with these people and you happen to walk with them doesn't make you any of the above. And I hope that you're not any of the, you know, the sort of things that I've listed. Now,
well, hang on, Sajjad. Hang on. These Swedish MEPs you're talking about are now sitting with the British Conservative Party. So I don't think that's a very, very good comparison. So can you name me one time when I've mixed with terrorists?
Those Swedish MEPs had some absolutely revolting
Well, you better ask Theresa May, because they're sitting with the Conservatives in Strasbourg.
Well, that doesn't let you off the hook, because you were also associated with them.
Sajjad,
I'm asking you.
When have I been with terrorists, Sajjad?
No, I never said that.
Well, I know. I'm asking you.
I've told you who you were with, and you haven't. Reply to that. Now,
I've told you they're now sitting with Mrs. May's party.
Which makes her equally as bad.
Oh.
Equally as bad.
Right.
Now, let me ask you something, Nigel. I'm a hard-working, working-class guy from Bradford. I've lived proudly in this country all my life. I love this country. My father fought for this country in the Second World War.
Yep.
I am a fair, honest guy, and I'll tell you what I've seen, what changes I've seen. I have seen Jeremy Corbyn stand up for the blacks in South Africa when there was apartheid there. I have seen Jeremy Corbyn stand up and protest for the weak and the oppressed. I honestly do not think he is racist, and I honestly do not think he is anti-Semitic. But I'll tell you what I do think. I think people like you... No, well, why are you not sure?
Because I tell you what, Sajjad, whatever company I may have kept over the years is as nothing compared to the company Jeremy Corbyn's kept.
Well, that could be real. Well, I'd question that.
I've never mixed with terrorists, Sajjad. I've never mixed with terrorists. I may have mixed with people that you think are bad guys. They've never been Listen, I love your passion. I understand. Sajid, you might get me the sack. We're so far over time for the news, but thank you. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show. It is now 7:32 and time for the news with Thomas Watts. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn, how many more chances does he want? There he is photographed at this Palestinian martyrs cemetery, and there in the cemetery are those people who committed those acts of barbarity, torture and murder at the 1972 Olympics, and it's not the first time that Jeremy Corbyn has been close to people and organisations who have done simply the most awful things. Now, some of you, of course, see him as a freedom fighter. Others think, frankly, he has soured the Labour Party and taken it away from its traditional route of being anti-racism and anti-Semitic. Joy on Facebook says, Corbyn supporters are mostly students. They do not know any better. Bit condescending, Joy, really. Kat says, does he stand up for anything British? No, Kat, never. He couldn't even sing the national anthem. I was sitting the row behind him in St Paul's Cathedral. He simply couldn't bring himself to do it. Now, tell you what is interesting. Whatever I've seen in the last 20 years, whether it's the European Union, whether it's Northern Ireland, wherever I go, the biggest divide in global politics, and this counts for Trump and Clinton and America too, the biggest divide is, do you come down on the side of Israel and their right to be a free independent state, however they might behave, which is not always perfect, and I say that as somebody on that side of the argument, or do you come down on the Palestinian side? You know, I mean, for example, Sherry Blair said she understood why people would be Palestinian suicide bombers. So you get the left, the internationalists, the globalists, those that are pro the European Union, those that want the United Kingdom to be in a different shape, take generally the Palestinian side of the argument, and those that are the sovereignists, or some of you may say the nationalists, take the Israeli side of the argument. It is the great divide in global politics. And so in Northern Ireland, you know, Ian Paisley, no longer with us, but Ian Paisley, the symbol, I suppose, of hardline unionism, you know, was quite happy at his rallies for the Israeli flag to be seen. Gerry Adams, Sinn Féin IRA, very happy for the Palestinian flag to be seen. The odd thing about Corbyn is whilst he's on that Palestinian side, he's also at the same time been a Eurosceptic, which leaves me terribly, terribly confused. But maybe Helena, a brand new caller from Camden, can solve all of this for me. Good evening, Helena.
Oh, hello, Nigel. Thank you for taking my call.
Welcome.
One thing I have really liked about you, Nigel, even if I don't agree with your politics, is that you don't cut people off if you don't agree with them. So I'm really hoping that you're going to listen to my point.
Well, Helena, it's called democracy. It's called freedom. Do you know, those that went before us...
What I believe in.
No, those that went before us fought and died in world wars so that you and I can have this conversation. So the floor is yours. I'm listening.
Thank you. Right, so I think it's really interesting that Benjamin Netanyahu has made a comment today, because I think that makes it really, really clear that, in fact, this argument in Britain about anti-Semitism is actually not about anti-Semitism, but about Israel. And I think that the whole thing has been clouded to hide the crimes, the war crimes that Israel is committing. You mentioned an occupation earlier, which I'd like to just speak to you about very briefly. The West Bank is occupied. I've been there for the last 2 summers, so I know it quite well. Human rights are abused on a daily basis. Palestinians are not allowed to travel from the West Bank into Israel itself unless they have a specific path. Children are arrested for throwing stones. A couple of weeks ago...
Well, Helena, it's a little bit more than throwing stones, isn't it?
Well, no, actually it's not. Children are arrested for throwing stones.
Well, I mean, a lot of the footage I've seen, it's people actually threatening to go across the border. But, Helena, look, I'm not here, right, to defend every action of Israel. I won't do that. But, Helena, can I just ask you quickly?
Yeah.
Do you think, in your own mind, that Israel has the right to exist as a state?
Well, Israel at the moment does exist as a state.
No, I'm asking you... No, that wasn't my question. I'm asking you, do you think Israel has the right to exist as a state?
I think Israel has the right to exist as a state, but I do not think it has the right to oppress the Palestinian people in the way that it does. There were 150 people killed in Gaza. Many of them were running away from the border. We don't hear about that. We don't hear about the nation-state law, which makes Jewish people of a higher status than Palestinian people. All we're hearing about is Jeremy's anti-Semitism, which is clearly a smear on him.
Helena, you've talked very specifically about the West Bank. Can I just ask you?
Yeah.
Do you agree with Jeremy Corbyn's statement when talking about the West Bank? He said they are under occupation of the very sort that will be recognised by many people in Europe who suffered that occupation during the Second World War. Do you think Corbyn alluding to Nazis is actually is actually useful?
Can I just give you one example, Jeremy? Sorry, Jeremy. Nigel, sorry.
Go on. You must be a Labour Party member, Helena.
Would you mind if I just give you one?
No,
really,
go on,
really
please.
Example? Okay, so last year I was, as I said, in the West Bank, and I was crossing over through a checkpoint on my way home with a suitcase with broken wheels. I had a Palestinian friend with me, and we went to the checkpoint, and he asked the soldier in the checkpoint if he could come with me just to carry my suitcase and then come straight back. And the soldier pointed a gun in his face.
Helena, there are tensions on both sides. Look, there are tensions on both sides. You've criticised Israel. I could equally criticise so many of the suicide bombers and others that have come from the other side. But can I ask you, Helena, you know, this debate is more about Jeremy Corbyn as a potential future Prime Minister. I mean, do you think it was a good image in the mid-1980s for him to appear in a committee room in the House of Commons with Gerry Adams and the late Martin McGuinness not long after the Brighton bomb?
Absolutely, because Jeremy has always been about peace and promoting the peace process. He'd been doing that in Palestine for years. He was doing that with Ireland for years. So yes, and I'm sorry if you don't agree with me, but absolutely history has shown that Jeremy is right.
And do you stand for the national anthem, Helena?
No.
No, well, there you are. Well, that says a lot, you see, but that says an awful lot to me, and I do not doubt the sincerity of your views, and I'm pleased that you've called. You're a first-time caller to the show, and you can call me any time you like in the future. We'll have this debate. Thank you, Helena. There you are. You see, free speech and democracy, but isn't it interesting that right at the end, she will not stand for our national anthem, and there are people of this Corbynista agenda that have a very different view to me, and I suspect a very different view to the vast majority of those of you out there listening to this. Let's go to Finchley and speak to Mike, another new caller of this show. Mike, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Thank you for taking my call.
Not one bit.
Okay, I feel very strongly against the last caller and her sentiments. It's a bit like listening to somebody defending Hitler and saying he only wanted peace. This man, Corbyn, has, in my opinion, only seemed to side with those who support terrorism and murder.
He really has got a very strange list of friends, Mike, hasn't he?
How can he be a man looking for peace, and how can anyone even get confused with that? And the other point is this. You've got pictures in the Daily Mail. I mean, a picture tells 1,000 words. Forget about what the Daily Mail says. Just look at the pictures and look at the stones and the people that he is standing over respecting. He's respecting characters that were involved in murdering. And by the way, the crimes were horrendous and horrific. There were people who were responsible for perpetrating the murders of innocent Israeli athletes. Nothing to do with the war, nothing to do with the arguments between Israel and Palestine. These are just innocent people.
And torture, Mike. Murder, torture and murder. I mean, the whole thing was appalling. In fact, I'm not even going to describe it at this time of the night.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you read what the wife of the first athlete that was murdered, who was, by the way, in crutches because he was injured. I know. And the wife didn't know for 20 years what the extent of the injuries were.
I know.
People were to know about it. they'd be horrified. At least normal people would be. But how can a man like Corbyn be running, and this is where I'm shocked and I feel ashamed to be British. How can we have a party, a major opposition party, be run by someone who basically is an anti-Semite? There is no question.
Well, Mike, I've got some good news for you, Mike. I've got some really good news for you. Because as each of these stories come out, I think it becomes less and less likely that Jeremy Corbyn looks like a credible Prime Minister.
He's not a credible Prime Minister. He never was a credible Prime Minister. What upsets me even more is not just his actions in the past, it's the people who still to this day support him and support his actions. And
well, we've had several
unpalatable.
We've had several callers tonight, Mike, that do. Wasn't it interesting with Helena, who I genuinely want to hear all opinions on this show, and they can challenge me and I can challenge them. But Mike, wasn't it interesting that Helena, who supports Corbyn, calls him a man of peace? And when I ask her, does she stand for the national anthem, the answer is no. Doesn't that tell us all we need to know?
Well, can I tell you, Nigel, I stand and support the national anthem.
I bet you do.
As a kid, I was a Cub Scout and actually went to Buckingham Palace because Prince Andrew joined a Cub Scout group in 1968. I'm very much a loyalist. I very much support the royal family and the British. And I also believe Israel has a right to exist. It's been around. Israelites have been there for over 3,000 years. How dare anyone dispute that Israel's got a right to exist on this land?
Mike, the next time the anthem plays, I'll stand right next to you. All right? You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 7:46. I think Jeremy Corbyn's been keeping bad company for years and years and years. And in a way, this photograph that appeared in the Daily Mail, I grant you, but has now appeared in many other media outlets, of him attending a Palestinian martyrs' cemetery where flowers were laid on the graves of those who committed the abomination in Munich at the 1972 Olympics did not surprise me at all. These people do not believe in the state of Israel existing, whether they can admit it or not. Your messages piling in. Paul from Greenwich makes a very powerful point, which many will disagree with, I'm sure. He says, Nigel, it's all to do with votes. Does he look like he supports the Jewish side with 250,000 votes or the Muslim side with 4 million? Wash your mouth out, Paul, with soap and water. That's not an acceptable comment in modern Britain, even if the arithmetic is fascinating. Corbyn says he associates with Palestinian terrorists because he's searching for peace. Has he ever talked to the Israelis? Marcus, no, he never, ever has. Matthew's really stumped me a bit here, actually, on Twitter. He says, I think Corbyn is completely wrong on anti-Semitism, but you can't say Corbyn doesn't believe in anything British when he wants to nationalise so much. Matthew, you've got me in a hole there. I can't really answer that one. Yeah, he believes in big state control, but he certainly doesn't believe in the symbolism of a nation. That's my view. I sat just behind him in that Battle of Britain service in St Paul's Cathedral. Let's go to Mark in Birmingham. Mark, good evening.
Hi there, Nigel. How you doing?
So is Corbyn fatally damaged by all of this?
No.
No?
No. No, he's not.
Well, it's pretty unsavoury, Mark, isn't it?
It is unsavoury, but let's just look. Okay, for instance, in your opinion, have you been dealt with by the press correctly? Do you think that you have been portrayed well?
Do you know what, Mark? I did say at the top of the hour that this was the Daily Mail and they hate him and it may well be a misportrayal, and I do agree with you. There is a possibility here that this has been over-egged, and I accept that point, Mark.
Because my opinion is, for instance, there's an interview with you in Trevor Phillips back a day where he asked, in UKIP land, there'd be no law against discrimination on the grounds of nationality. Would there be a law against discrimination on the grounds of race or colour? And you said no.
Well, Mark, I think we're going back 5 or 6 years. We could confuse the. I generally think everyone should be treated equally. But hey, let's get back to where we are. And by the way, Trevor Phillips and I now get on incredibly well, and I like him very much indeed. But Mark, even if this story has been over-egged, and I grant you that's possible, I tell you what's not over-egged. And that's the photograph and the footage of him with Adams and McGuinness in the House of Commons shortly after the Brighton bomb. I mean, this man... let me just say this, Mark. This man appears to be attracted to some very bad people.
How are you supposed to broker peace if you don't talk to the other side?
That's absolutely right, and I acknowledge that point, but not within months of an attempt to blow up the entire British government. I mean, you know, the IRA got closer than Guy Fawkes ever did.
Pretty close. I think my point is this. I think the idea that Jeremy Corbyn himself is an anti-Semite is ridiculous. He's definitely anti-Israel, and they can't deny that.
Mm-hmm.
But in my opinion, if it was 1948 right now, I'd say Israel doesn't have a right to exist. But
would you?
Now,
would you really? So would you have denied the Jewish people their own homeland, Mark?
I would have said that Europe should have taken in the Jewish people all across Europe. What really happened was that Britain and France and such didn't really want them, and so they sent them to Israel following the Zionist ideology, and cut up a country like they did with India and Pakistan, really badly, and then left it to its own devices.
Well, this went back to a
single time.
This went back to a previous war, didn't it? It went back to the Balfour Declaration of 1917, and the Jewish people have been promised a homeland. Interestingly, and very, very few people know this, you know, what we now know as Uganda was actually by many proposed to be the first potential place for a Jewish homeland, but that was considered to be unacceptable. But so post-war, Mark, 1948. No, I'm really interested in this. So it's 1948. 6 million Jews have just been exterminated, and you would have said to them, "No, you haven't got a right to a homeland."
I would have said that it would be a bad call to cut up a country with people who already live there, and give that country to a people who to a people. Now, it's irrelevant if that was a Jewish people or otherwise. For me, the idea of cutting a country up when you are not even a part of that country. We owned Palestine, basically.
We did.
And we just cut it up when here's Israel, here's Palestine, deal with it.
So is Corbyn basically right to question the existence of Israel?
Firstly, I don't think he's ever questioned the existence of Israel.
He's compared them to the Nazis in terms of what's happening in the West Bank.
Yeah, but he was at the time with a gentleman that was also comparing them to the Nazis.
So what? No, Mark, come on. Just because you're with somebody doesn't mean you change your story, does it?
He was a Jewish survivor of the Holocaust. Has he not got the right to say that?
He's got the right to say whatever he likes. Jeremy Corbyn is now the leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition. Hang on, Mark. He is a potential Prime Minister. Do you think that with these links and associations, he looks like a Prime Minister?
What links and associations? Apart from
IRA. Hamas. Sorry, I hadn't even got there. Hamas. He calls them friends. There's barely a terrorist organisation in the West that Jeremy's not friendly with.
Okay, so Margaret Thatcher called Pinochet her friend, and she was genuinely friends with Pinochet. That doesn't make Margaret Thatcher a racist or a extremist. Just as Jeremy Corbyn went in Parliament.
That was 35 years ago, Mark. I'm dealing with now. All right?
It was in a debate in Parliament that he called his friends Hamas. I wouldn't really, in a debate, when trying to be diplomatic, turn around and be, my enemy is Hamas. Probably not going to go down.
Why call them a friend, Mark?
Probably because of courtesy.
Well, I tell you what, Mark. This guy extends courtesy to every lot of bad guys that exist in the world. Mark, listen, we've had a long talk. Finally, can I ask you, do you think any of this damages Corbyn's prospects of becoming the next Prime Minister?
No.
Why then, with the Tory party completely all over the shop, are Labour 4% behind in the polls?
Why are they 4% behind the polls? Because we've broken down back to a two-party system, which means that now both parties have commanded almost 50% of the votes. There's not much room to move.
They're way below 50%, Mark. One is 39, one is 35. Mark, listen, we've spent ages together. I've enjoyed it. I haven't agreed with much of it, but hey, I've got time for one last caller. Paul, a new caller to the show from Folkestone. Paul, time is short. You've got a minute to tell me what you think. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. I think Jeremy Corbyn has positioned himself over the last 30 years in Parliament on the backbenches as a rebel. I think that that is the character that he tried to develop. Unfortunately, he didn't expect to be in this position. and it's all now coming to backfire on him. The sooner that he goes and Sir Keir Starmer or David Miliband comes back from US or whatever, replace him, the better for all of us who depend on the Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn is keeping the Labour Party from being in power and helping all of us.
But, Paul, it's not going to happen, because you know, all those £3 members that Ed Miliband encouraged to join, many of them are hard left. The very people Kinnock and co fought to get rid of. He's there forever almost, Paul, isn't he?
I mentioned Sir Keir Starmer, because it needs someone to bring it all together again, closer to the centre.
Well, Paul, I understand your point, but given the current Labour membership, there's not a cat's chance in hell. Sorry the call was so short. Tom from Ottershaw solves the whole thing. He says, I've just taken an expert opinion from my 19-year-old daughter. She says the shine has gone from Jeremy Corbyn. It's official. He is finished. Well, that solves it all. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'll be back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. At 10 tonight, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you. Coming up between